Hey, everybody, welcome back. So, diving into our next section, we're going to look at life under slavery. So, known as the peculiar institution, this is effectively a life of incessant toil, punishment, and fear. There's very few, if any, legal rights in existence, and there was nothing protecting you from being sold at will. But I will point out, not all laws were rigorously enforced. Um, Now, here's a pretty famous case. This is actually from Missouri. This is the case of Celia. She killed fighting off a sexual assault. She killed her owner. And under the law, technically that was acceptable. However, she was ruled not a woman since she was a slave and convicted of murder. It's a really messed up crime that I very much recommend that you look into if you're interested. But in the long run, it is important to point out that under the law, they had few to none rights, and that even extends to freed people as well. Freed Black Americans did not have many legal rights, if at all, at this point in history. With especially in the South, as more and more policies were being introduced that were slowly stripping those rights away. So conditions. Some southern states did enact laws to prevent the mistreatment of slaves, but did it really lead to an improved standard of living? We're not entirely sure. Um, they actually had a better diet than slaves in other countries. And with the removal of the slave trade, owners needed to take better care of their slaves. It was overall a goal meant to strengthen slavery, not undermine it. Since they weren't allowed to import any new slaves, they had to maintain the populations that they had, which unfortunately leads to a lot of positives in the sense that their standards of living get better and there's less struggles in terms of food and disease. But again, when you look at it through the context of they're still being enslaved, they're still viewed as property, it kind of contradicts that notion. So the existence of slavery does help define the status of those blacks who were free. In some cases, they were descendants of slaves freed by southern owners. The word free takes on a really new meaning, and they did have some rights, like they could own property, but they were unable to own dogs, guns, or purchase liquor. Which, out of those three things, none of those things entirely make sense given the era of history. And they were considered to be undesirable members of society. While they were not necessarily enslaved or forced to work, they were still treated rather poorly, just simply based on the color of their skin. Now, very few free blacks, lived in the lower South. Most resided in cities. Some did become wealthy. And in the upper South, most lived as farm laborers. So it's kind of a different stratification of how they're treated depending on which part of the South they are located in. If they're in the upper South, they're mostly living on farms as laborers, but they're still considered they're still free. In the lower South, though, they're primarily found in the cities, and some do achieve some wealth, but it's not on the same level as the planter class that we talked about earlier. Now, this was a massive system of labor that basically was designed that you were working from the moment the came up till the moment the sun went down. These larger plantations, their communities were really diversified, essentially functioning as small towns, and they played multiple roles. And even on some of these larger plantations, some slave owners gave trusted slaves extensive responsibilities, effectively telling them to run the communities and to basically be the ones that are in charge of everything, and in some cases, dole out punishments. Now, the large majority are going to work in the fields and labor in gangs, essentially, overseen by a slave driver, and these were typically where the hardest conditions were present, at least in the lower South. Especially if you think about this summer in particular. I'm recording this in August of 2026. It's 100 plus degrees outside. Imagine being outside working in that all day. It is not great. And a lot of times, these conditions and exposure to the elements is what directly leads to the deaths of people due to exposure. But I mean, that's not factoring in deaths from beatings or escape attempts or disease. Now, in the cities, they typically represented urban craftsmen that were very skilled and enjoyed considerable autonomy. Most that lived in the cities were servants, cooks, and other domestic laborers. And for the most part, they were allowed to make arrangements with their employers and have some modicum of freedom. Most lived on their own in separate houses and were able to own property. But it's important to point out they will eventually be replaced with white craftsmen as the racial divides become larger over time. Now, slave owners, they're going to employ a variety of means to maintain order and discipline. And a lot of it, they're allowed to do whatever they want. There's no legal precedent or law saying, oh, this is the way you're supposed to treat your slaves. So a lot of times it results to violence or more subtle means to control them, like giving them incentives like extra food or time off, or the threat of sale and splitting up families. A lot of times, the incentive of just getting to stay with your family was enough to knock out any sort of resistance whatsoever. Now, this is where I think the most interesting part of this comes from is the unique culture that emerges in African American communities under slavery. Now, the family, it's like most communities, it's the center of their community. On most plantations, males outnumbered females, which made the creation of families more possible. But here's the thing, though, marriages were not recognized unless disrupted by sale. These marriages would last a lifetime. And due to sales, most often, females actually led the households. Like they were the ones calling the shots because 9 times out of 10, the men were more likely to be sold off than the women. Like I said, the threat of sale was a big potential risk of that was used to keep people in line. This video does a really good job explaining this, so I will link that in the description box down below. Gender roles, they differed markedly from those in larger societies. The cult of domesticity that we've talked about before doesn't apply here. And men couldn't provide or protect their families. And a lot of times they're forced to rely on their slave owners to provide those basic protections. Now, in their own time, they're actually going to see traditional roles prevail in terms of like the way cultures were set up at the time. In terms of slave religion, like this is where a very unique brand of Christianity and unique form of religion forms. Like it's probably one of the most unique formations of Christianity to emerge. Now, it does transform Christianity towards their own purposes, and specifically, they highlight the stories of Moses and Exodus because it heavily reflects their own experiences. And they're going to identify themselves as the chosen people by God, this becoming their massive gospel of freedom, and like it's kind of their rallying cry. They also rested on the conviction of the injustice of bondage and desire for freedom. They understood the impossible task of directly confronting the system, and a lot of times they used hymns as a form to resist. Now, along with this, there was a lot of attempts by their owners to prevent education, thinking if they kept them dumb and illiterate, they would not think about the world around them. But it's important to point out they were still learning about the world around them. Most would be bound to local communities, but knew little of the world around them. But like they still kind of had these ideas starting to form of here's what's out there. So in terms of resistance, day-to-day resistance or silent sabotage, a lot of times they break tools or do poor work, fake illness, and serious crimes and like that sort of thing didn't happen very often, but like it was a lot of like small forms of resistance, anything they could do to sabotage the day-to-day work. Now, more threatening to the stability of slavery was fugitive slaves. The big problem was they didn't know the geography around them. Most successful escape attempts were the ones living in the upper South bordering free states that were easily able to cross the Mason-Dixon line into a northern state where they would be considered free. In the lower South, they headed to the major cities like New Orleans or Charleston and essentially hide in plain sight until they could get out. Some fled to more remote areas, so like the Seminoles in Florida offered refuge before sending them west. And actually, it's important to point out many Native Americans are going to help fugitive slaves escape the South. So a lot of times we kind of overlook that part of escape, like fugitive slaves and like how they get away. But a lot of times Native Americans helped because they were willing to speak out against the United States and like that institution because they were also being discriminated against, and they were more than willing to help people get away. Obviously, a big part of this is the Underground Railroad, which I know you guys have learned about before, so this will be linked in the description box down below. One of the big things we have to talk about in terms of slave resistance is the Amistad. In 1839, 53 slaves are going to seize control of the Amistad, and the ship is eventually going to be captured by the U.S. Navy. Now, President Van Buren at this point is like not entirely sure what to do. Now, he's thinking, oh, we'll send them to Cuba. They'll be Cuba's problem. They'll get sold into slavery, yada, yada, yada. Abolitionists, on the other hand, are like, no, they should get to do what they want to do. They should get to go home, and takes the case all the way to the Supreme Court. John Quincy Adams actually argues that they were kidnapped since the slave trade had been already ruled illegal and had been illegal in the United States for 31 years at this point. So the court actually ruled them free, most of them returning to Africa. But it's important to point out this has no bearing on slaves in the United States because these were people coming to the United States, not people that were already here. So it's a win, but it's also not a huge win in the grand scheme of things because it doesn't necessarily influence a ton here in the US. Slave revolt's pretty common, sometimes moved into outright rebellion. Gabriel's Rebellion, which we've talked about previously, New Orleans, Denmark's Vesey, all failed or were mostly unsuccessful. For the most part, slave revolts just didn't work in the long run. And then we also have Nat Turner's Rebellion, which is a big one. And when we're talking about overall rebellions, again, that'll be linked down below. So to wrap up, here are our learning objectives that we covered today. And looking ahead, you've got a discussion board, a DBQ assignment, a quiz, and then you're going to be watching another episode of America, the Story of Us, and doing an analysis on that. I'll see you all next week. Bye, guys.